It's funny looking back, how perfect everything seemed. I always thought I had it all figured out. My wife, Lisa, she was everything to me. I believed with all my heart that we were a team, that loyalty meant something. People always talk about marriages falling apart, but I never thought that could be us. Lisa, she wasn't just my wife, she was my partner, my best friend. I mean, sure, like any man, I had my fears. Who doesn't, right? But the idea of Lisa cheating on me? No way. That kind of stuff happens to other people, not us. I trusted her completely. She'd always been loyal, or so I thought. The thought that she could betray me like that, I just couldn't accept it. I guess that's what makes betrayal so cruel. It sneaks up on you when you're not looking. I wasn't asking for much, just a happy, peaceful life. Growing old together, maybe a couple of vacations here and there, nothing fancy, just happiness. With Lisa by my side, I never imagined things could turn out any differently. I believed in the fairy tale ending, the happily ever after, because that's what you do when you love someone. But deep down, I guess there were little cracks, fears I never wanted to admit. Every now and then, something would tug at the back of my mind. Lisa working late, texting someone more than usual, but I'd brush it off. I trusted her. She wouldn't do that to me. No, Lisa was different. Or so I thought. Things started feeling off. I didn't notice it at first. I was caught up in our routine, just living life. But then, one day, everything changed. It started with a conversation, one I never expected. My neighbor Tom pulled me aside. He had this serious look on his face, like he didn't really want to say what he was about to say. "David," he said, "I've seen Lisa around. She's been with someone who's not you." At first, I didn't believe him. I mean, who would? I brushed it off, thinking, Tom must have it wrong. He probably saw her with a colleague or a friend. It's nothing. But the way he said it, I don't know. It stuck with me. It was like a little crack in my mind, something that just wouldn't go away. And then I started noticing things myself. Little things, like how she was spending more time on her phone, stepping outside for calls, or how she'd be out late from work, later than usual, with some excuse that didn't quite add up. I even remember one night she came home, and I could have sworn she smelled different, not like her usual perfume. But still, I told myself, no, Lisa wouldn't do that. We'd been together too long. I had no reason to doubt her. But the more I tried to push it aside, the more it kept creeping back. Every little detail suddenly felt like a clue, like maybe there was something I wasn't seeing. You ever have that gut feeling, like something's wrong, but you just can't put your finger on it? That's what it was like. I couldn't stop thinking about what Tom said. It was eating at me. Was I just being paranoid, or was there something more going on? I didn't want to believe it, but the doubts were there. It's like once someone plants that seed in your mind, you start questioning everything. I found myself wondering, who was she texting late at night? Why did she suddenly have to go out of town for work? And why was she so secretive about it? It was all too much to ignore, but at the same time, I didn't want to be that guy, the guy who doesn't trust his own wife. But the curiosity, the suspicion, it was gnawing at me, and I couldn't just let it go. After a few days, it was like I couldn't think about anything else. Everywhere I looked, there was something reminding me of what Tom said. Lisa was right there, but she felt distant. I couldn't tell if it was in my head or if something had actually changed. It's crazy how your mind can play tricks on you. One moment I'd be telling myself, David, stop it. You're being paranoid. She loves you. The next moment, I'd be replaying every interaction, every conversation, and wondering, what if she's lying? What if Tom was right? I'd watch her, looking for clues, anything to either prove or disprove what I was feeling. But it was like I couldn't trust my own instincts anymore. Every time she smiled at me, I'd feel a flicker of hope. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe everything's fine. But then, when she'd go out, or be on her phone late at night, that doubt would creep back in. And the worst part? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be the guy who snoops around, who doubts his wife, but I couldn't shake it. The uncertainty was eating away at me. It was like I was on this emotional roller coaster. One minute, I was angry, convinced she was hiding something. The next, I was scared of what I might find if I actually looked for the truth. But the curiosity, the need to know, it got the better of me. I had to find out. I needed to know if what I was feeling was real or if I was just losing my mind. So one day, when she left the house for work, I decided to look through her things. I can't even describe the guilt I felt doing that, but I couldn't help myself. I checked her messages, her emails, and nothing. There was nothing there, but then I thought, she's smarter than that. She wouldn't leave anything obvious. That's when I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I bought a camera. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't losing it. I set it up in the house, hidden in a place where she wouldn't see it. It felt wrong. It felt dirty. But at the same time, I was desperate. I just wanted to know the truth. Whatever that truth was, I had to have it. I'll never forget that day. It was just a regular afternoon. At least, that's how it started. Lisa had gone out again, another one of her work meetings. And there I was, sitting alone, staring at that camera footage. I hadn't watched it yet. I kept putting it off, like maybe if I didn't look, I could still hold on to the hope that I was wrong. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep running from it. My hands were shaking as I hit play. The screen flickered to life, showing the inside of my home, the place that was supposed to be our safe space, our sanctuary. And for a few moments, everything was normal, just an empty room. And then, it happened. I saw them. I saw her, Lisa, and him, a guy I didn't even know. They were laughing, touching, like they were so comfortable, like it was something they'd done 100 times before. My stomach turned. I wanted to stop watching. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I couldn't. I watched as they moved around the house where we built a life together, and then, the moment I dreaded most. They kissed. And it wasn't just a kiss. It was intimate, familiar. And at that moment, everything shattered. Every doubt I had, every bit of suspicion, all of it came crashing down. There was no more guessing, no more what if. This was it. This was the truth I had been so afraid to face. Lisa, my wife, was having an affair. And not just any affair, she was bringing him into our home. Our home. The place we built together. The place where we shared memories. And now it was tainted. I remember sitting there, feeling like I couldn't breathe. It was like my whole world had collapsed in an instant. All the love, the trust, everything we had, gone. Just like that. I had been holding on to this tiny sliver of hope that maybe I was wrong, that maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. This was as real as it gets. And the worst part? She didn't even know. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know that her secret life had just come crashing down around her. And I didn't know what to do. Do I confront her? Do I throw it all in her face? Or do I just walk away? I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying the footage in my mind. Every smile she gave him, every touch, every laugh. It was like I was watching someone else. That wasn't the Lisa I knew. Or maybe I never really knew her at all. The shock turned to anger. Pure, raw anger. How could she do this? How could she lie to me, betray me like this? And then, as the anger started to fade, all that was left was pain. This deep, gut-wrenching pain that I didn't know how to handle. I felt lost, like everything I thought I knew was a lie. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The images were burned into my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. And all I could think was, what do I do now? The truth was out. The loop of suspicion had closed, but with it came a new loop, one of devastation, one that I wasn't sure how to escape. After that night, everything felt different. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was shattered. I remember sitting alone in the quiet of the house and thinking, how did I get here? How did it all fall apart so fast? I couldn't wrap my head around it. How someone who was supposed to love me, who promised me forever, could just break everything we had without a second thought. But then, the worst thoughts started creeping in. The ones that make you question yourself. It wasn't just about Lisa anymore. It was about me. Was this my fault? Did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? I started picking apart every little thing I'd done, every moment in our marriage, wondering if maybe I could have seen this coming, if maybe I'd been blind to something I should have noticed sooner. And it hurt, you know. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about me, about my own self-worth. All these years, I thought I was a good husband. I thought I gave her everything she needed. But clearly, I wasn't enough. I wasn't successful enough. I didn't make enough money. I didn't give her the life she wanted. And now, she found someone else. The self-doubt was suffocating. I started questioning everything about myself. Maybe I didn't work hard enough. Maybe I wasn't attentive enough. Maybe I'd let things slip. But no matter how much I tried to find a reason, it all came back to the same feeling, that I had failed. Failed as a husband. Failed as a man. I mean, who am I kidding? I've always struggled with this. I've never had much success with women before Lisa. I wasn't the guy who got all the attention or had his life perfectly together. And Lisa, well, she was the one good thing in my life. I thought we were solid, that we were partners. But now I couldn't help but feel like she'd just moved on because I wasn't enough anymore. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks you. It makes you question your worth, your place in the world. I looked in the mirror and I didn't even recognize the man staring back at me. I wasn't the confident, trusting person I used to be. I was just broken. And the worst part? I didn't know how to fix it. How do you fix something that's been so deeply shattered? How do you rebuild when you're not even sure you were ever good enough in the first place? I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I had the proof. I had seen everything. There was no more wondering, no more suspicion. It was real. The question wasn't whether I would confront her. It was when. And how. The next day, she came home. Like it was just another day. I watched her move around the house. So normal, so casual. And it hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she act like everything was fine when I knew what she'd been doing behind my back? I couldn't hold it in any longer. I had to confront her. I waited until she sat down. And then, I just said it. "Lisa, we need to talk." She looked at me, confused, maybe even a little nervous, but she had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest, and said, I know about everything. Her face, I'll never forget it. It was like all the color drained from her skin. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it. "You think I don't know?" I said, my voice shaking with anger and pain. "I've seen the footage, Lisa. I know what you've been doing with him." There was a long silence. She looked like she was searching for the right words, but what could she say? There was no way to justify it, no way to explain what she had done. She finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost pleading. "David, I didn't mean for it to happen." And that was it. That was all she had to say. No apology, no explanation, just excuses. I could feel the anger rising in me. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice full of disbelief. "You've been bringing him into our home. Our home, Lisa. Do you even understand what you've done?" I stood up, pacing back and forth, my mind racing. How could she not see the damage she'd caused? How could she not understand the betrayal? She started crying then, saying how sorry she was, how it was a mistake, how she didn't know why she did it. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Her words just felt hollow. I asked her the question that had been burning in my mind since the moment I saw that footage. "Why, Lisa? Why him? Why now? Was I not enough for you?" She couldn't look me in the eye. She just kept saying, "It wasn't about you. It wasn't your fault." But how could it not be? I couldn't help but feel like I was the one who failed, like I wasn't enough to keep her. The conversation went on for what felt like hours, but in the end, nothing she said could undo what she had done. There was no going back. The trust was gone. The love we once had. It was tainted, and all I could feel was this overwhelming sense of betrayal, anger, and pain. I remember standing there, looking at her, and realizing that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was gone. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. After the confrontation, I was left standing in the wreckage of what used to be my marriage. Lisa was still there, physically, but everything had changed. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was angry. Angry at her for destroying everything we'd built. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But another part of me, it just felt empty. Like there was this huge hole where my life used to be. And that's when the real battle began. The one inside me. Do I stay? Do I try to work things out? Or do I walk away and leave everything behind? It sounds simple, right? But it wasn't. I was torn between these two versions of my life, and I couldn't see which one was the right path. On one hand, I couldn't shake the memories of the good times, how we'd laughed together, how we'd built a life together. Lisa had been a huge part of my life for so long, and the idea of just cutting that off felt impossible. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about everything we had been before that. Could I really just throw it all away? But then on the other hand, how could I stay with someone who had done this to me? How could I ever trust her again? Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies, the cheating, the betrayal. Even if we tried to move on, how could things ever be the same? That trust was broken, shattered into a million pieces, and I wasn't sure it could ever be put back together. I went back and forth for days, maybe weeks. One minute, I was convinced that leaving was the only option. You deserve better, I'd tell myself. You can't live like this. But then I'd think about what leaving really meant. Divorce, starting over, being alone. Was I ready for that? Was I strong enough to walk away from everything I knew? And then there was Lisa. She begged me to stay. She promised me it would never happen again. that we could fix things, that we could get back to where we were. But could we? Was that even possible? Every time she tried to talk to me, all I could see was the betrayal, the hurt. I'd hear her words, but they didn't sink in. I wasn't sure I could believe her anymore. The weight of the decision was crushing. It wasn't just about me, it was about everything we had built together, our life, our future. If I left, I'd be walking away from all of that. But if I stayed, would I ever be able to forgive her? Would I ever be able to look at her without seeing the man she brought into our home? I knew that whichever choice I made, there was no going back. If I stayed, I'd have to live with the betrayal every day, try to rebuild something that might never be whole again. And if I left, well, I'd have to start over, alone. In the end, it came down to one question. Could I ever trust her again? Could I look her in the eye and feel the same love I once felt? Or was that gone forever? It wasn't an easy question to answer, and even now, part of me wonders if I made the right choice. After everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't make this decision on my own. I was too close to it, too wrapped up in my own emotions to see things clearly. So, I did what anyone in my situation would do. I reached out to the people who knew me best, the ones I trusted to help me figure out what to do next. I started with my best friend, Mike. We'd known each other for years, and if anyone could give me straight advice, it was him. I told him everything, about the affair, about the confrontation, about how lost I felt, and Mike, being Mike, didn't hold back. "David," he said, "you can't stay with someone who did this to you. You deserve better than that." He didn't sugarcoat it. He was angry on my behalf, telling me to walk away, to start over. "She's not worth your time," he said. But then I talked to my sister, Emily. She had a different perspective. "People make mistakes," she told me. "Maybe there's a way to work through this. You don't have to throw everything away just because she made a terrible choice." Emily reminded me of the good times Lisa and I had shared, how much love we'd once had. "It's not that simple," she said. "You don't just erase all those years together." And that's where the conflict grew. On one side, I had Mike telling me to walk away, to cut ties and never look back. On the other, Emily was reminding me that love is complicated, that sometimes people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they can't be forgiven. I even spoke to my parents about it. My dad was pretty quiet, just listening. But my mum, she was heartbroken for me. "Whatever you decide, we're here for you," she said. "But you have to do what's right for you, not for anyone else." And that was the hardest part. Everyone had advice. Everyone had their opinions. But in the end, it was my life, my marriage. Each conversation gave me a new perspective. But they didn't make the decision any easier. In fact, they only added to the confusion. Should I listen to Mike and walk away, knowing I'd probably never trust Lisa again? Or should I take Emily's advice, try to work through the betrayal, and see if there was any way to rebuild what we had? It was overwhelming. I appreciated their support, but it felt like no one could really understand what I was going through. At the end of the day, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. I was the one who had to live with the choice. I was the one who had to decide if I could ever forgive her, or if it was time to move on. After weeks of going back and forth, wrestling with the decision, I finally realized something. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. Whether I stayed with Lisa or walked away, one thing was clear. I had to start healing. I couldn't let this betrayal define me, control me any longer. I had to find a way to move forward, no matter what the future held. The first step was simple, but it felt monumental. I started taking care of myself. I hadn't realized how much I'd let myself go in the middle of all this chaos. I stopped eating right, stopped working out, barely even slept. So I started small, going for a run in the mornings, eating better, cutting out the late-night drinks that had become too easy to reach for. It wasn't just about my physical health, though. I needed to get my mind right, too. I reached out to a therapist, someone I could talk to who wasn't emotionally tied to the situation. At first, I wasn't sure if it would help, but having someone to really listen, someone who could help me untangle the mess in my head, it made a difference. Slowly, I started to see things a little more clearly. It wasn't just about what Lisa had done. It was about how I was going to rebuild myself from this. She had broken my trust, but I couldn't let that break me. I started focusing on the things that I had control over, my own happiness, my own peace. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in that place of anger and pain forever. I found strength in small victories, like getting out of bed in the morning without feeling that crushing weight on my chest, or going a full day without replaying the betrayal over and over in my mind. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but little by little, I started to feel more like myself again. I stopped looking at Lisa as the center of my world. I started seeing her for what she was, a part of my life, but not my whole life. And with that came a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't know where the future would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over it. I wasn't fully healed yet, far from it, but I was starting the process. I was starting to put myself back together. And in the end, that's what mattered most. I didn't think I was ready. After everything that happened with Lisa, the idea of opening myself up to someone new, it terrified me. I told myself I needed more time, that I wasn't ready for anything serious. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Her name was Sarah. We met through a mutual friend at a small gathering. Nothing special, just a few people hanging out. She wasn't flashy or overly outgoing. She was just kind. She had this warmth about her that put me at ease. I found myself talking to her more than I expected, and before I knew it, we were exchanging numbers. At first, I kept it casual, just friendly texts here and there, nothing serious. I didn't want to rush into anything. I was still rebuilding, still healing. But there was something about Sarah that made me feel comfortable. She didn't push or pry, she just listened. And for the first time, in a long time, I felt like I could actually be myself around someone without the weight of everything that had happened hanging over me. As time went on, we started spending more time together. A coffee here, a walk there, and slowly, without even realizing it, I began to let my guard down. It wasn't easy. Trust didn't come naturally anymore, not after what I'd been through. There were moments where I'd catch myself pulling back, wondering if I was setting myself up to be hurt again. But Sarah, she had a way of calming those fears. She never asked for more than I was ready to give, and that made all the difference. With her, I didn't feel pressured to move faster than I was comfortable with. She understood that I was still healing, still trying to figure things out. And that understanding, that patience, it made me realize that maybe I could trust again. Maybe not fully, not yet, but it was a start. We talked about everything. My past, her past, our hopes, our fears. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected, sharing things I hadn't even talked about with Lisa. It wasn't that Sarah was perfect, it was that she was real. She wasn't trying to fix me or save me. She was just there, a steady presence as I navigated this new chapter in my life. I won't lie and say I wasn't scared. I was. I still am in a lot of ways. But for the first time since the betrayal, I feel like I can see a future, one where I'm not defined by what happened to me, one where love, real love, might be possible again. Sarah is part of that future. I don't know where it will lead, but for now, I'm willing to take it one day at a time. If you had asked me months ago where I thought I'd be today, I never would have imagined this. I never would have thought I could feel happy again. But here I am, looking back on everything, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the doubt, and realizing that somehow I made it through. The journey wasn't easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. When Lisa betrayed me, it felt like my world had ended. I didn't know how to pick up the pieces, didn't know if I'd ever be able to trust again. But slowly, with time, I started to heal. Meeting Sarah didn't magically fix everything. It wasn't like the movies where someone comes in and saves you from your past. No, it was much more real than that. She didn't heal me, but she helped me realize that healing was possible. That love, even after everything I'd been through, was still something I could find again. I learned that trust doesn't come all at once. It's something you rebuild, piece by piece. With Sarah, I've learned to take things one step at a time, to be open and honest about my fears, and to understand that it's okay to be vulnerable. She's shown me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. It just has to be true. Looking back, I realized that the betrayal didn't define me. It was a part of my story, yes, but it wasn't the end. It was a chapter, and I've turned the page. Now, I'm writing a new chapter, one filled with hope, with trust, with the possibility of a future that I never thought I'd have again. I'm not the same person I was before all of this, but in a way, I think I'm stronger. I've learned more about myself than I ever thought possible. And I've learned that happiness, real happiness, is something you can rebuild, even after it's been shattered. With Sarah, I've found that happiness again. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I do know one thing. I'm ready for whatever comes next, because for the first time in a long time, I believe in love again, and I believe in myself.